good afternoon, good evening, or good morning, depending wherever in the world you are joining us from today. And greetings from here in Hong Kong on this beautiful Monday morning. Let me first say thank you to the board of the Museum of Social Justice, Jennifer and Dominica, for recognizing me as one of the social justice heroes this year. It was truly a shock to get the email from Jennifer not long after I had arrived here in Hong Kong to letting me know that I had been chosen. And in that first email, Jennifer asked me if I'd be willing to share a bit about my work in fighting human trafficking. And as I reflected, I couldn't quite figure out just what to share. I thought I could share about how I had just learned how the Hong Kong government legislators had pushed so hard for over 5 years to get some form of protection for victims of trafficking here in the region. And so the legislation had been passed to protect possible future victims, as the Hong Kong government denies that human trafficking even takes place here in the city, turning a blind eye to the many victims of labor trafficking from migrant domestic worker communities, especially from Indonesia. Thought about how I could share the stories of some of the nearly 60 survivors that I had worked with at the Filipino Migrant Center, and then almost 65 that the center has served in their 10 years of existence. How many of them had found us as their last resort, knowing something was wrong, but not knowing what to do about it. Or how the survivors worked so hard to educate the South Bay and wider Los Angeles Filipino and non Filipino communities on what is labor trafficking, that it is part of human trafficking, and how prevalent it truly is in the Filipino community. But this didn't quite feel right either. And the more I reflected, the more I realized that I wanted to focus as a young person who has answered God's call into social justice ministry full time on the importance of understanding the intersections of the struggles for justice and how that understanding has to be rooted in love, for love translates all languages. And it is this grounding that has helped shape who I am and who I was to become in my time in Los Angeles, a grounding whose roots go back to the spiritual collective that is the 580 Cafe at UCLA and the Filipino organizing community where I found a home. As 2020 began and I watched the pandemic hit Hong Kong first in January, leaving so many migrant workers here stranded, vulnerable to human traffickers, or even just denied the ability to have their 1 day off per week. Because how does one rest and the call to work from home when one's workplace is also their home, as the Hong Kong government mandates that all domestic workers live in their employers' homes? Over and over again, my community here told me, here are our lessons, and let yourself be loved there in Los Angeles. And as life transitioned online in Southern California, it was these lessons of months of experience in Hong Kong that I had to continue in building community, supporting each other, and safely getting out correct information. And as I shared these lessons, I also saw how fast the migrant and immigrant communities were able to adapt through the tears, the struggles, the pain, but also the love and care for each other that shone through, and each other as people in each other's communities. For whether it was the fight to get UCLA to provide relief to their undocumented DACA AB 540 or international students, the resistance of rising fascism back in home countries from the Philippines to El Salvador, where governments were using lockdowns in the name of the pandemic to justify militarization and vilification of human rights defenders, or the fight of the protection of immigration benefits in the United States, such as the T visa or refugee status, and the protection and the struggle of the thousands stranded at our borders awaiting their court dates in conditions that are nowhere close to what the WHO is calling for in this pandemic. And in the midst of this, what some don't realize is I actually moved to West LA, moving in with two student leaders, community organizers, and dear friends from Anak Bayan at UCLA. And then in this home that we built of mutual love for the people and for each other, with understandings of our personal realities and commitments to make it work, I was reminded that in doing social justice work, when we live into the uncomfortabilities of the struggles and the intersections for the work for justice and peace, we can achieve the unthinkable. For our house, it was becoming just that, a house, but even more so becoming kasamas, becoming siblings. To this day, regularly in touch with each other, doing life together, even though life now falls on both sides of the Pacific, as our hearts beat for the same dreams of justice and peace. And I began to reflect that this journey doesn't stop with my flatmates. For if we were all to come together across issues of social justice, embrace these uncomfortable intersections, like so many young people are doing in Los Angeles already, we were to embrace the reality that human trafficking in immigrant communities would almost be an unneeded conversation if we address the root issues in their home countries of basic work, living wages, safe places to live, and the direct impact on the land of both United States companies as well as the US military and seizing resources to benefit not those countries, but us in the United States of America. Instead, letting the people there keep their resources in their country to support themselves. Then families would not be forced to separate and migrate by the need to survive, and instead could work safely and live with their loved ones. So I challenge you, let us learn directly from those directly impacted. Let us give them the leadership and the reins to lead the movements going forward, following that leadership. And I know one day, in the not so distant future, we will all live in a world where families are not broken up by the need to survive. And we tell our grandchildren and our great grandchildren of how human trafficking was the battle that we fought and the battle that we were able to win for justice and peace for all of God's children. Thank you.